Hello and welcome to Awful Histories. Today we'll be looking at a vital topic in English history, the English Civil War. Awful Histories. The date was 23rd of October 1642, and the first battle of the English Civil War was starting up, Edge Hill.
All attempts of any kind of compromise between King Charles the Royalists and Parliament the Roundheads broke down early 1642. Both sides had large armies to make their way by scaring their opponent with the sheer look of their army. The Earl of Essex had told his men to stop Charles' advance through London. In September, Essex gained Worcester.
However, in October, he and his army moved towards Warwick to head off any chance of the Royalists advancing on the capital. On the night before, October 22nd, 1642, men from each side bumped into each other accidentally at the village of Wormleighton, near Warwick, near the destination of the Parliamentarians.
Unknown to the Earl, Royalist army had come from their temporary base in Shrewsbury, en route to London, as there was a huge communication problem during this time. Essex had no clue which route Charles was taking. Also, the Royalist troops at Wormleighton were between London and the Parliamentarian army. However, no one on either side knew how close they were to each other. When Charles realised this, he got his army up at Edge Hill.
Edge Hill was at the base of a very, very steep hill. The hill was where Charles gathered his army. His position gave him the best view of the other side. They could see exactly what Essex was doing. Essex decided against attacking the king. An indication of how good the position they were in was. Essex also had lots of valuable troops, more than Charles, and more cannons, and he wasn't willing to lose any unnecessarily.
As Essex went attack uphill, Charles decided to make the first move and advance on him. They got about half a mile away from the Parliamentarians and they weren't being fired upon. The first actual combat involved cavalry when Prince Rupert led charge against Parliamentarian soldiers who were commanded by Sir Faithful Fortesque. When confronted by Rupert and his men, he immediately betrayed his men and switched sides out of fear. He went from leading troops for one side 1 minute to attacking them brutally from the other side the next.
The left flank, led by Sir James Ramsay, took a brutal hit and nearly all of them were killed. Essex's men looked very vulnerable too, and could have easily been attacked by Rupert. However, just as he did at Naseby, Prince Rupert ignored the actual battle and rode past it to a nearby village called Kinton. His men ran into several new to the battle Parliamentarian regiments. They had a small fight after which Royalist horsemen returned to the battle. They didn't make that much of a difference as they were very worn out and had lost the element of surprise. Right in the centre of the fighting is where the Parliamentarians were more successful. They pushed back the advance of the Kingsfoot soldiers. Parliamentarian dragoons, led by Sir William Balfour, played a very important part here. Royalist foot soldiers fell into disarray in the centre with no obvious commander.
The battle ended with no obvious victor or vanquished. The short and October day ended the battle with both sides losing about 1,500 men, mainly infantry. Both sides claimed victory. Essex prepared to continue the battle on the next day but decided otherwise when it became obvious that his men were exhausted. He withdrew his men to Warwick. The same was true for the Royalist force. Exhaustion meant that it was not capable of continuing the battle. Musketeer would wear a wide leather band around his neck called a bandolier, and hang from his bandolier are 12 leather containers, each holding a charge of gunpowder. They would have a leather tunic to protect them from powder burns. Both sides would have worn fairly similar clothing. They would all have breeches, short trousers fastened below the knee, and doublets, a short, close-fitted padded jacket, made of woolen cloth, linen shirts, and leather boots.
A pikeman would have worn a doublet and a buff coat. Over them he would have worn a helmet, breast and back plates, and an armoured skirt. His breeches would be tied at the knee with ribbon bows. He also would have thick leather shoes.
The Battle of Naseby was probably the most important battle during the English Civil War. It was fought on the 14th of June 1645. For this there had been no indication from either side that they had a military advantage. After the second battle at Newbury, Parliament, who was strongly influenced by Oliver Cromwell, came to the conclusion that a national army bound by loyalty to a national commander was very useful. It was much better for an army to be loyal to a national commander than to a regional one.
This showed a major contrast with the normality of the time where a person's loyalty to the region he lived in was a good enough reason for the person to fight and protect it from the enemy. After realising that a new modernised approach was needed, the parliamentarians created the new model army.
On record, there were 12,000 foot soldiers and 6,000 cavalry. These 18,000 soldiers were divided into 12 regiments. They managed to get lots of cavalry rather easily. This was not the case for infantry though. 5,000 of the infantrymen were conscripts. This means they were forced into military service. They weren't strong soldiers or men who were raised to fight. Oliver Cromwell was not the commander of the new model army because of the self-denying ordinance. This was a bill passed by the House of Commons on the 19th of December 1644, disallowing any member of the House of Commons or House of Lords from commanding in the army or navy. It was Sir Thomas Fairfax who commanded them. However, a special temporary commission did allow Cromwell to be Lieutenant General of Force. In May of 1645, Charles I marched a very large royalist force north to attack a parliamentarian force taking over Chester. Once they heard this, Sir William Brereton, the leader of the parliamentarian force taking over Chester, retreated. This took away Charles's opportunity to show the superiority of his army. That didn't stop him though, as he turned south and besieged the parliamentarian tower of Leicester. This was easy from the royalist force's point of view. Although this could have sent out a clear message to Fairfax, who was based in Oxford, about the strength and professionalism of the royalist army, it was actually quite a clouded one. The royalists attacked the tower with 12,000 men on the 30th of May 1645, but there was only 2,000 defending it. The town's defence did last only 3 hours.
Charles now targeted Oxford, his old capital. Being thrilled with the victory, Fairfax was besieging Oxford at this time. Fairfax had two choices, either continue to besiege Oxford or take on the incoming royalists. He chose to take on Charles. On 3rd June, Fairfax moved his men to go and confront Charles. Charles's senior commanders were starting their opinions varying from Charles's. This included the very capable Prince Rupert. The majority of the royalists thought that they could defend Scotland in the north before moving south to defeat Fairfax. Charles ignored these ideas. He probably didn't realise that his army wasn't as good as he thought it was.
Fairfax was a prestigious military man. He was aware of the new model army was not as effective as he wanted it to be. On the 8th of June he arrived at Newport Pagnell. He knew he needed support to increase the strength of his men. Both sides waited for support. Fairfax's was closer and therefore arrived first, and the royalist support had come from Wales and Somerset. Neither arrived by the time Naseby was fought. Somerset's force never arrived. Having worked out how weak their position was, Charles moved north of Daventry. He was unaware of the parliamentarian scouts that were tracking their every move. On the night of the 13th of June, Charles decided that any move further north would play into the hands of the parliamentarians, who would pick off their rear markers at ease. Prince Rupert didn't want to attack the new model army, but Royal Council of War overruled him. Charles decided that attacking was their best option. The battle was fought on June 14th, 1645.
The new model army set itself up on a ridge overlooking Naseby before the battle started. However, Cromwell ordered them off the ridge, as Charles wouldn't attack such a good position. This was important as they were waiting for Charles to attack them. He moved up 1.5 miles back into Naseby village. Charles commanded 8,000 and 9,000 men, Fairfax commanded 13,000. Both sides faced each other only half a mile apart. Cromwell's horsemen were on the flank of Parliament's force, and he could call on 3,500 men. On the left flank for the parliamentarians were Henry Ireton's horsemen, and opposing him were the horsemen of Prince Rupert and Prince Maurice. Between both sets of horsemen on both sides were the infantry.
At 10 o'clock the battle started when Rupert attacked Henry Ireton's force. His men easily destroyed Ireton's force, but attacked a baggage wagon in Naseby instead of attacking Parliament's infantry formations that were easily open to a cavalry flank. This mistake wouldn't have changed who won in the end, but could have made the battle a lot harder for Fairfax. On the right flank, Marmaduke Langdale attacked Cromwell. This was at the same time Rupert attacked Ireton. Langdale failed, with Cromwell defeating them with ease. This exposed the king's infantry to attack. Cromwell used this weakness, but kept some men reserved as a sort of insurance. It was the attack on the right flank of the royalists that doomed Charles and made him lose. The royalist infantry broke up, having no form of firm leadership. He succeeded in pushing back the first line of Parliament infantry, led by Sir Philip Skipton. The royalist force was open to cavalry attack on both flanks, while having to fight Parliament's infantry force in front of it Surrender was the only real option.
Historians see the overwhelming success of the new model army at Naseby as the time when Charles lost the English Civil War. It was a defeat that never recovered from. Ironically, the battle started with the success of Prince Rupert, but this could not be followed up. Rupert had perfected the tactic of very speedy cavalry attack, and even at Naseby this worked. If Langdale had equally successful on this other flank, the battle could have turned in favour of the Royalists. However, it was not to be. The Royalist force lost over 1,000 men, while the new model army only lost 200.
The date was Sunday, 23rd of October. The date was 23rd of October, 1642, and the first battle of the